You must not notify the police or military if you don't want to endanger her life. You must give us the ransom of 5 million pesos in the denomination of 1,000, all of which must be used bills. You have 72 hours maximum to acquire this amount. Once the time is up, you must place the following ad in the newspaper. Tropic and the Truth About Guerrero. Nightclub Bocasio invites you to enjoy the best Cuban music. Come and have a good time. We'll be waiting for you. The ransom must be delivered by the girl's father, dressed in white, in a white convertible safari. During the course of the negotiations, we will indicate the exact place where to bring the ransom money. The life of the kidnapped depends upon your compliance with our demands and instructions followed to the tooth. They did say tooth. Otherwise, you'll be sorry. Mexicanos, proletarios, united, fighting against the bourgeoisie and their estate. That was the first ransom note. That was given to my parents on May 24th. On May 24th, I was on my way to school. I said earlier, school was very early for us, and we got out early because of the heat. And we lived on the beach. So the road that took you to the main road, it would kind of be like this street out here, actually. The school bus could not go down. So me and my nanny, and I hate that word, but yes, the nanny, were walking. We had to get to the main costera. And as we're walking, there's this turnoff here and a turnoff here. Over here was a Volkswagen taxi. Taxis look exactly the same as they do now, but it was a bug. And over here were two men standing. Remember when I said, I know what I know, I know? As we walked, I knew they were going to take me. I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. And as we got closer, these two came. They grabbed me, they grabbed her, put us in the back of the taxi, kept us head down. At some point I realized later on, much later on, like later on in life, that I had to have been drugged. Or that they had to put something over, drug me, I guess is what I'll say, because I don't remember them. I have no recollection of them dropping her off, because I know had we stopped, I'd remember. I woke up in a house. Now let me say what I'm about to say. There were only 3 times in this 24-hour period where I was ever not outside, tied to a tree, or tied up. I lived outside during this 24-hour period. Days, I'm sorry, 24 days. 24 days. So, that's the first one. Let's go to the second ransom note. Notice to the Mooney family, to the family of the girl. We want you to know your daughter is well. And if you want to see her alive again, you must comply with the following instructions. As we indicated in our first letter, you or a person of trust must hand over the ransom, as we have previously indicated. You or a person trusted by you must arrive at 7 p.m. to the town of 30 kilometers, that's the name of the town, and then take the road towards the town of Ejido Nuevo. At this town, you will stop for a minute, returning right away to the town of 30 kilometers. During the course of this, we will intersect. The code will be the red t-shirt we will wave. We're sending you proof of that your daughter is doing fine. Note, the delivery of the ransom will be made by Friday the 28th of May. I was taken on the 24th of May. So they had made an arrangement for the ransom. The ransom, my dad was the gentleman with the big afro, if y'all haven't figured that out yet. So my dad was not going to pay the ransom, but my dad was not the one to make the drop. So somebody, a friend of his by the name of Juan Gomez, was going to put on a wig and make the drop. The original drop was going to be at a cemetery. My dad did not know this until very recently, that I was at the cemetery. He didn't know I was there. I was at that first drop. The first drop went bad. I was behind a tombstone. A headstone. Somebody else found out about the drop. Don't know if it was the cops, don't know who it was. Long story short, there was a big shootout. Bullets are flying everywhere. Juan was there, but they go off. Whoever took the money, I'm carted off. That was the first ransom drop that went bad. However, let me say, go back a little bit. From the very first day when I was taken to a house. I was in that house and I heard all these voices. And they were all men's voices and I was in a room. And then about a couple of hours later, they took me. We drove and drove and drove and drove and drove. Hours and hours and hours and hours. And then they dropped us off, myself and about 8 other people. Total involved, there were probably over 20. Total involved in everything that was going on. We walked up we walked up a mountain. And I lived in that mountain. That's the mountain, where I was. And I was tied up the very first day. I actually have scars around my ankles. And I used to have a scar here on my neck, rope burns. And when you heard me speaking in the video, so I was kidnapped the day before my father's birthday, which is May 25th, his birthday. But a week later, I was dancing in front of the president of Mexico, whose name at the time was Echevarria, and I had a solo. So I was like, yeah, I gotta get back. I'm not really sure what's happening here, but I'm about to dance with the president. And the person I am now is probably still the same 8-year-old I was. So I stayed up on that mountain. Things were apparently being done down, trying to negotiate or whatever the case may be, but it wasn't going well at all. There's a big cathedral in Acapulco in the middle of town, and that was like where all the notes. If this note gets to the police, consider your daughter dead. The ransom money to free the girl must be, now they've lowered it, a minimum of 3 million pesos in the denomination of 1,000 bills. Let's just all talk about that 1,000 peso note that none of us can cash today. Okay, nobody wants it. All of which must be used. The person with the ransom must also drive the white safari and the driver must also dress in white. At 1 p.m., June 1st, tonight, again, I was taken the 24th, must be the person the ransom leave. Please believe I am not reading badly. This is what it says. You will go towards the airport at a speed of 50 to 60 kilometers, right? Yeah. Miles per hour, kilometers per hour. And once you pass the gas station in Puerto Marquez, you will see a sign that says Pierre Marquez. At the roundabout, in the shape of a half moon, you'll need to come back and deposit the money between the flowers, and you will drive away without stopping at the same speed. The life of the kidnapped depends on you following the instructions as to be indicated. Therefore, you decide whether she lives or dies. So that was June 1st. So by now, some of you may be going, okay, so why is this brown girl in Acapulco, Mexico? I moved to Acapulco when I was about 3. His family came over in 1910. He actually, and many people don't know this, and my dad didn't know this, and I've recently found this out. My grandfather was actually married before. He married my grandmother. And his wife, whose name was Christine, died in childbirth, as well as the child. My grandfather met my grandmother. It's a cute story, I'll tell it real quick. My grandfather, we call him Dada, was dating my grandmother, who is a very, very dark-skinned woman from Virginia who sang the blues and was as bow-legged could be. And she was singing, And she actually had a record out, a couple, and it was something like the Hoochie Coochie something or other. And it's like the Hoochie Coochie, and anyway, she was dating someone, and I guess the guy punched her. So Dada came to see his girlfriend, the girl he was dating, who was Nana's friend, and was like, yo, what happened? And she's like, yeah, nah, it's nothing. And he's like, no, what happened? He's like, I'm gonna go take care of it. So there was a butcher down the street. So Dada went, the butcher wasn't open from what I'm told, but my grandfather got in and came up to Nana's apartment with a steak. And he said, put this on your eye. And Nana said, I'll be damned. He's like, no, it'll make it go down. She said, I'll be damned if I'm wasting this steak, get the skillet. And love bloomed. Now mind you, my dad is the 7th of 9. My dad was born in 26. So we're going really way back when this very, 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 very Caucasian Irish man was with this very, 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 very dark black woman from Virginia. They had 9 kids. It was definitely love. Oftentimes you hear people talk about, what, meant plantation, master may have done. Nope, this was straight up, pure, deep love. You gotta be loved for 9 kids in my opinion. But anyway, long story short, they had their 9 kids. Times were hard on the boulevard. So my dad, like the rest of the world, my dad said he grew up in a neighborhood where it was Jewish, Italian, and black. Because back then, the Italians and the Jews were considered just as low as the blacks. So they all grew up together. He said when he was coming up, they sang the Italian national anthem. He used to do things like ride on the back of the stagecoach, the buggies, the horse and buggies where they used to sell fruit. And I remember going, I'm sorry, there was a horse and a buggy? He's like, yeah, this is the 1920s. So we're gonna fast forward a little bit. My dad had an 8th grade education. And the first time he committed a crime, he went to what was called boys' school. School for boys, bad boys is what we'll call it. It has a name, but I forget the name of the actual school. They just shut it down not too long ago. Callie and I looked it up. And then at the age of 18, he robbed he robbed a liquor store. And he was arrested, he and his friend, and he ended up going to Sing Sing prison at 18. When he was locked up in Sing Sing, he was locked up with some notables. He was locked up, many of you probably know the name Bumpy Johnson. He was locked up with Bumpy, but he did not know Bumpy. They were on separate wings, I'll say. Cell blocks. Okay, so you know about cell blocks? Okay. They were on separate cell blocks, and Bumpy was older than my dad. Much older from what I understand. But my dad was for whatever reason, he was close to the Italians on that section. And what had happened was, my dad's brother, my Uncle Benny, was also locked up at the same prison. As was, if many of you know anything about the 5 families, Lucky Luciano. And Lucky Luciano's right-hand man was called Little Davy Patello. And you know how like now, I said it like we all know, like we're all down with the jail culture. But everyone kind of sticks to their own side, and that was understood. So somebody from the Italian side, this jar, but it was tuna fish packed in oil with mayonnaise. That's gross. And I wasn't gonna eat it. And I told them I wasn't gonna eat it. So I didn't. So they sent, can you please send money to feed your kid, because she's apparently not into what we have. So my parents did. And my dad, remembers being told that I was sick. In one of the ransom notes, they said that they sent proof that I was alive. I'm not sure what that was. Later on came 2 more proof of lives. This is the 3rd note. Now, mind you, we already have 1 fouled ransom drop. Last notice to the Mooney family. If this note gets to the police, consider your daughter dead. The ransom money to free the girl must be, now they've lowered it, a minimum of 3 million pesos. in the denomination of 1,000 bills. Let's just all talk about that 1,000 peso note that none of us can cash today. Okay. Nobody wants it. All of which must be used. The person with the ransom must also drive the white safari and the driver must also dress in white. At 1 p.m., June 1st, tonight, again, I was taken the 24th, must be the person the ransom leave. Please believe I am not reading badly. This is what it says. You will go towards the airport at a speed of 50 to 60 kilometers, right? Yeah. Miles per hour, kilometers per hour. And once you pass the gas station at Puerto Marquez, you will see a sign that says Pierre Marquez. At the roundabout, in the shape of a half moon, you'll need to come back and deposit the money between the flowers, and you will drive away without stopping at the same speed. The life of the kidnapped depends on you following the instructions as we indicated. Therefore, you decide whether she lives or dies. So that was June 1st. So by now, some of you may be going, okay, so why is this brown girl in Acapulco, Mexico? I moved to Acapulco when I was about 3. Right over here behind, we have Alejandra, raise your hand. Alejandra and I have been primaria or kinder? We started first grade together. We went to the same school. We've been friends ever since. This is her daughter over here. So I started kindergarten in Mexico, in Acapulco. Why was I in Acapulco? Let's go back a bit. So my dad, Peter Mooney, and my brother's right there, by the way. My dad passed away last year, January 4th of 2023. My dad was born in 1926. My dad's father, my grandfather, who I never had the opportunity to meet, was born in 1878 in Ireland. Full white man from Ireland. His family came over in 1910. He actually, and many people don't know this, and my dad didn't know this, and I've recently found this out. My grandfather was actually married before. He married my grandmother. And his wife, whose name was Christine, died in childbirth, as well as the child. My grandfather met my grandmother. It's a cute story, I'll tell it real quick. My grandfather, we call him Dada, was dating my grandmother, who is a very, very dark-skinned woman from Virginia who sang the blues and was as bow-legged could be. And she was singing, and she actually had a record out, a couple, and it was something like the Hoochie Coochie something or other. And it's like the Hoochie Coochie, and anyway, she was dating someone, and I guess the guy punched her. So Dada came to see his girlfriend, the girl he was dating, who was Nana's friend, and was like, yo, what happened? And she's like, yeah, nah, it's nothing. And he's like, no, what happened? He's like, I'm gonna go take care of it. So there was a butcher down the street. So Dada went, the butcher wasn't open from what I'm told, but my grandfather got in and came up to Nana's apartment with a steak. And he said, put this on your eye. And Nana said, I'll be damned. He's like, no, it'll make it go down. She said, I'll be damned if I'm wasting this steak, get the skillet. And love bloomed. Now, mind you, my dad is the 7th of 9. My dad was born in 26. So we're going really way back when this very, 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 very Caucasian Irish man was with this very, 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 very dark black woman from Virginia. They had 9 kids. It was definitely love. Oftentimes you hear people talk about, what, meant plantation, master may have done. Nope, this was straight up pure deep love. You gotta be loved for 9 kids in my opinion. But anyway, long story short, they had their 9 kids. Times were hard on the boulevard. So my dad, like the rest of the world, my dad said he grew up in a neighborhood where it was Jewish, Italian, and black. Because back then, the Italians and the Jews were considered just as low as the blacks. So they all grew up together. He said when he was coming up, they sang the Italian national anthem. He used to do things like ride on the back of the stagecoach, the buggies, the horse and buggies where they used to sell fruit. And I remember going, I'm sorry, there was a horse and a buggy? He's like, yeah, this is the 1920s. So we're gonna fast forward a little bit. My dad had an 8th grade education. And the first time he committed a crime, he went to what was called boys' school. School for boys, bad boys is what we'll call it. It has a name, but I forget the name of the actual school. They just shut it down not too long ago. Callie and I looked it up. And then at the age of 18, he robbed he robbed a liquor store. And he was arrested, he and his friend, and he ended up going to Sing Sing prison at 18. When he was locked up in Sing Sing, he was locked up with some notables. He was locked up, many of you probably know the name Bumpy Johnson. He was locked up with Bumpy, but he did not know Bumpy. They were on separate wings, I'll say. Cell blocks. Okay, so you know about cell blocks? Okay. They were on separate cell blocks, and Bumpy was older than my dad. Much older from what I understand. But my dad was, for whatever reason, he was close to the Italians on that section. And what had happened was my dad's brother, my Uncle Benny, was also locked up at the same prison. As was, if many of you know anything about the 5 families, Lucky Luciano. And Lucky Luciano's right-hand man was called Little Davy Patello. And you know how like now, I said it like we all know, like we're all down with the jail culture. But everyone kind of sticks to their own side, and that was understood. So somebody from the Italian side went to the over to the black side, and did something, I don't know if he punched him or stabbed Uncle Benny. Shift him, right? Yeah, shame, okay. Stabbed my Uncle Benny. And he wasn't supposed to do that. So my dad took it upon himself to march himself over to the Italian side. And basically said, that's wrong. Like, all I'm saying is, that's not right. What he did was wrong. That's not right. They were like, he kind of cool. All right, he right. Our dude was wrong. They took a liking to my dad, and after that, from what I'm told, everybody knew that Pete was okay, and Davy Patello had him, and you left Pete alone. When other people came in, somebody recently told me that they knew my dad could get cigarettes for them and everything else that anybody else needed. Now, my dad is a kid, for all intents and purposes, 18. We're going to fast forward. Lucky Luciano gets out. He gets deported back to Italy. That's the deal that the government made with him. My dad gets out. He's back in Brooklyn. Little Davy Patello gets out. My dad gets a call saying, hey, we want to invite you down to Little Davy's welcome home party. Okay. Dad goes. Only black man. He light bright, but he's still a black man. And they said, you know what, Pete? Well, first Dad said they looked at him, but everybody was like, no, he's with Davy. And he was like, you know what, Pete? You don't have to do stick-ups anymore. We'll teach you how to make money. So back then, all the crap games used to be in the white people's houses. I'm sorry, all the crap games were white, but in the black people's houses. So they had my dad setting up the crap games and collecting the money. And he said he was making like 100 and something a week, which was a lot of money back then, because he said his brother, his eldest brother, my Uncle Joe, only made 60 a week, and he had a real W-2. We're going to fast forward and say that my dad, I can't say rose to the ranks, but my dad made bank. And then my dad hit the number, and he hit it really, really big. And if you guys don't know what the number is, it is now what is the legal lotto. But back then, you played the number, whether a couple of cents, a couple of dollars, but if you hit big, and it had to all do with the horses and the racetracks and the final number of attendants, it's like a whole thing. My brother tried to explain it to me, and I was like, that's not my ministry. So, anyway, at some point, my dad becomes the biggest numbers runner, dealer, policy house. They call them bankers, actually, and because they have policy houses in Brooklyn. And he was an independent. There are articles in newspapers that talk about, some people say that he was with Vario's crew. He and Paul Vario, and I'll backtrack. If you've ever seen the movie Goodfellas, the character Paulie, played by Paul Sorvino, is Paul Vario. That's the character, and was my dad's friend. So some people say Paulie gave him, permission, or he ran with Paulie's crew. My dad was an independent. We're going to fast forward to say that in the 70s, something came down that was called the Knapp Commission. And that was all about, because it's called racketeering, scooping up all the numbers runners and all the mobsters. There's like this 5-6-page article in New Yorker and the Times Magazine talking about the mafia taking over the boroughs. One thing my dad always taught us, and that came from his dad, was you never snitch. Never, ever, ever, ever snitch. So, as my dad said, they had a subpoena for him. I've been told a couple of things. One was that they were hoping he would roll over in Vario because the subpoena was out for Paul Vario. Long story short, we moved. Hence, I lived in Acapulco, Mexico from the age of 3. My brother is older than I am, so he was he went to college. My sisters are also older than me. So by the time we moved there, they went off to boarding school. So it was just kind of me as a little girl there. My sisters went to middle school and high school in Cuernavaca. As my husband introduced, yes, I had many luxuries. I grew up, once the condo was built, we lived in a beautiful condo. We had the 17th and 18th floor. My husband teases me because in every bedroom, there's literally a button that you press that rang in the maid's quarters for her to come bring you whatever you wanted. And there are times that I'll wake up and go, I want my button. Eric's like, okay, what do you need? Because sometimes you just miss the button. And every night before bed, we all had a pitcher of water, ice cold water with glasses and everything else. So that's how I ended up in Mexico. I was not taken because of anything to do with what happened in the States. I was taken because we were in Mexico and my dad had money. It was strictly a money thing. I just want to pivot for a minute and say, so it doesn't matter why a child is taken. It doesn't matter why anyone is taken. Any child who's abducted, regardless of the reason, there's a trauma that only we can understand. And we all know the overwhelming amount of brown girls who are not even reported. But I'm going to swivel back to me. So I've told you a little bit about my dad. Now let me tell you about my mom, who's the complete opposite and contrast. My mother grew up in what was considered, what was the word recently used? Sedity? So my mother grew up in Brooklyn, but on the opposite side of the tracks. My mother was raised by her paternal grandparents because her father was also in Sing Sing, my grandfather, for murder. So, would you like to hear this love story? Apparently, my grandfather, Danny, who was in 25 years to life for murder of a cop, had the privilege of working in the warden's laundry room. And my dad would, would go past or whatever, and would go past my grandfather's cell. And he said, I kept seeing this picture. And I was like, dang, she's a beautiful woman. I'm going to marry her someday. Well, they say we like bad boys, but okay. So I'm going to pivot and say when he got out, he was at a bar. He said, who's that? They said, that's Danny Nathan. That's Danny Nathan's daughter and Ray Nathan's niece. And my dad was like, oh, that's the woman on the wall. And love. I'm just not sure how I feel. You saw my mother on the jail cell wall. That's just different. That's a different kind of love story. But okay, it worked, right? So that's how they sort of met. But my mother came from a world completely different than my dad's. My mother, my mother's grandfather who raised her was the first black ADA, the first black judge in Kings County, Brooklyn. Very different than my dad's side of the family. when my mother graduated high school, junior high, it was written up in the newspaper, all the families that were attending. My mother got her first job as a Gal Friday, and the person she was working for put it in the newspaper that it was such an honor to have Lois Nathan working for him. That's how she grew up. But she fell in love with Pete. Okay. Hey. Long story short, not long story short, because it is a long-ass story, but all of that to say that very polar opposites. She taught him what fork to use, the ways of etiquette, how to dress. When he got to a certain level, there used to be, not used to be, because nobody's 100% sure if he's alive, but a big-time numbers runner, but who also dealt in drugs, and that was the thing that anybody will tell you. Pete ran numbers, but if you dealt drugs, one of y'all was ringing. The call is coming from inside the house. Run. If you dealt drugs, my dad had no part of that. So the person I'm talking about is Frank Matthews. Not to be confused with the other Frank from Frank Lucas. And the real gangsters of those days will tell you that 90% of American gangster is false. Frank Lucas did not do all that was portrayed to happen, not at all. And the producers, unfortunately, did not find out a lot of it till after. Denzel did a phenomenal job, not taking away from that. But Frank Lucas's life was not quite that. But Frank Matthews, he was that. He brought drugs in from Vietnam. He did a lot of that. But he got out. They say he left with $300 million in suitcases and hasn't been seen or heard from yet since. His son recently died and his wife recently passed away. Not 100%. Nobody knows if he's alive or not. He would be in his 80s, I believe. He was younger than my dad. My dad passed away at 97, 96-ish. Okay. And he lived a long life. So people are like, oh, I'm like, no, he lived a hell of a life. But that is what I come from. That is the stock I come from. What's even more interesting is I didn't know any of this until November 11, 2018. That was the first time I was able to sit down with my dad and have this conversation. And it was for the purposes of a project that Callie and I were working on. So we're going to go back to Mexico and me being kidnapped. And like I said, all adults here, the notebook I'm going to share. This notebook started out that was going to be a book. And I could not get very far, so it ended up becoming just kind of a journal. But I wrote it as a teenager, and it says, where does one begin with a very long story? Not just a made-up story, but my story. My very real story. I guess I'll do it in blocks and periods as I remember them. May 24th to June 15th. Was scared, yet felt safe. I really don't remember going to the bathroom. And I know I am a very picky person. I know I must have put up a fight when someone told me to shit in the woods. I saw a man killed, a man who said he was going to take me to see my father, or to call. I don't remember bathing except for once. I was in a river and was told to wash my hair. Ha ha, joke. I had never washed my own hair. You could probably see I had a lot of hair growing up, so hair was washed for me by my sister. And they told me to go wash my hair. One of the biggest reasons was I wore a uniform and I had 2 ponytails. I was very, very recognizable. And then, of course, everybody knows this girl got kidnapped. So they changed me into this brown and orange flowered dress, which I remember very well, and told me to take out my ponytails, and therefore Chaka Khan emerged out of the water. I remember every smell. I remember being tied up. I also remember being very bored every day. I wondered if it would be my last. I remember being raped. I remember being raped when I was 8. I was with 2 of the guys. I remember hearing them talk about it. Then they told me to take off my dress. I said, no. Of course I did. They again told me to take it off. I said, why? I was told because I said so. I did. I remember taking a very long time. I then remember one of the guys who almost looked black. His hair was very kinky, and he was the first. He couldn't get it in. The other guy was telling him to stop. I remember saying it hurt. Well, he got it in. There was about 3 or 5 minutes. The other guy said, she's bleeding. The other one said, she'll be fine. After the second one stopped, I went to sleep. They did, however, tell me not to tell any of the other guys. After that, I guess it got around because it happened on a regular, continuous basis. I remember one time I said that God wouldn't like it. They said there was no God. I remember that hurt me a lot. So, that was pretty much my 24 days. And again, I'm outside the whole time. They say when I came back, I was covered with bugs. Bug bites, I apologize, bug bites. After I came home, after I was released and came home, I moved back to the United States probably within 3 or 4 days. Like, they got me the hell out of Dodge. However, I did not know we were moving back. Nobody told me. I remember being in my bedroom, and I heard voices, and my bedroom was on the second floor, and on the second floor there's like almost a little bit smaller than this whole area here, and the bedrooms were like around, and I heard voices, and I heard some of my classmates, and my dad was giving away all my toys, and I did not understand because it was, not to be funny, but it was the Barbie penthouse, and she also had a plane, and I had everything Barbie had, and they were just like in the middle, and people were taking them, and I didn't understand. And I didn't know that we were going back for good because all I really remembered was Mexico. We're going to pivot, go to New York. I moved back to New York at the age of 8. Like a fish out of water. I do not understand the customs. I was a fish out of water. I had not experienced New York schools or even learning school in English. I came to school, like here, we'd go to what's called the papeleria. You guys probably all know the papeleria, but we'd go and get like our school supplies, you know? Our English books had blue plastic paper and Spanish books had red plastic paper because we had to cover your books. But our paper, our loose leaf paper was different colors. I had pink, I had green, I had blue. So I came to schools in the States with that, and that teacher did not like it. His name was Mr. Catania. I will never forget him. Living in the United States from 8 to 12 was a really difficult time for me. We lived in what I will call the Trump Towers of Long Island-ish. It's a place called North Shore Towers. For all my New Yorkers, if you know where it is, it's right outside of Flora Park off the Grand Central Parkway. And again, I'm back to being the only black, only brown person. Telly Savalas lived there. And I used to always ride the elevator with him, and I fascinated him, and he fascinated me, probably. I hope everybody here knows who Telly Savalas is, Kojak. So again, I'm out of place. I didn't realize until very, very recently, like a couple of months ago, you know, a lot of people say that people who are abused, sometimes, you know, predators see them, notice them, there's something about them, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I realized it's because every situation I was in, I was the only brown person. Even before we moved to Mexico, the first time I ever remember anything happening to me, I lived in Baldwin and I was 3. So the States wasn't my favorite place, we'll say that, but there was a lot of abuse that took place, and I won't go into detail when I lived there as well. I turned 12, it was almost 4 years exactly from the time I moved back to the States. I was told different things. My dad says he didn't remember. Some people said a deal was made between the two countries because the United States and Mexico are allies, so we're going to keep it all quiet. My dad says, that sounds about right, but your mom really wanted to live there. So we go back. So I go back when I'm 12, and I stay for a while, a few years, through high school. And then I come back to the States. So I come back to the States, and my dad has always supported me. Now let me say this, another aha moment. I did not realize until Callie and I started working on this project that after I was kidnapped, I never lived with my father another day in my life. But financially, the rent was always paid, et cetera, et cetera. He, up until I was 15, he had always been, the rent would show up. I don't know how. And let me also say, I was a grown-ass woman, pregnant, before I had a phone number from my father. So y'all probably figured out how old I am by now, but I was grown. But I was not allowed to call him. Back in the day, you'd have to page him, or you'd call the bar, and he'd call back, whatever the case may be. But one day, he just didn't show up and pay the rent. We lived in the house, and it just so happened that I started dating the owner's, our landlord's son, Richard Walter Pendleton. And he didn't show up for the rent. The rent back then was $600 a month for a 3-bedroom. And 2 weeks later, still no rent, still no rent. Now, mind you, ain't nobody know how to get in touch with this man. My mother had not worked since she had that gal guy Friday, and then she worked, I think, for the Bank of New York, way back when. Also, let me say minimum wage was $3.35. The only coats my mother owned came off of dead animals, from a seal to a chinchilla to a white mink to a brown mink to a cape to a black mink. My mother only wore mink. I don't know if PETA even existed then. But rent had to get paid because the lights got cut off. That much I do remember. And I do remember having to leave the lights on so the roaches wouldn't come out. My sister, Lynn, I'll pivot to her in a little bit, but she was there too. So my mother had to go get a job for the first time in forever, taking the Q5AB bus down to Jamaica Avenue to get over to Jericho Turnpike for $3.35. But that wasn't going to pay the rent or do anything else. So I've told you a little bit about, my experiences, but somebody had to make a living and bring in some money. So at the age of 15, my mother would say, built like a brick shit house. So I went to work. So I became a dancer. But I was going to be smart. I went down to Wall Street. And I only worked the lunch hour. So 2.5 hours, I would swing from a pole. And dancing was very different back then, let me tell you. There was no pop it, pop it, pop it. No, I did my Debbie Allen moment. And my sister and my mother thought I worked for an answering service and for a designer. Because I was home by normal. I would walk up and down in the village because I was done working. I literally worked the lunch hour. And there's nothing but white men who would come in and just hand me money. So when I said I know how to eat, beans from a can, I do. When I used to have a buzzer to push, I did. But life happened. After that, I decided I would, move. I didn't want to do that anymore. So I went to a private club. And lap dancing was very different then, let me just say that. It is not what it is now. But it was supposed to be $1 a minute. And I could name multiple celebrities who would be in there. And all you had to do was literally sit and do that. So it's supposed to be $1 a minute, but I never took less than 20. And I'm a teenager. Let's keep this in mind. I'm definitely a teenager. So that's what I did. And then I sent myself to college. And as my brother would say, because he dropped me off, I went to that Christian college up in the mountains. I went to Nyack College because I was going to a Christian college because my best friend growing up in Mexico, Shally, went to the same college and I needed something familiar. So I went to put myself through college. To this day, I don't know people like how I paid for it, how I did it, but I did it. Then I left Nyack. But there have been a lots of twists and turns. This picture right here. When I was taken, they told me I was in Guadalajara. And it felt like I could have been in Guadalajara, because when I tell you we walked and walked and walked and walked and walked, the day the first time I was abused, they took off the blindfold and I saw this cross. This cross is in Acapulco in a place called Las Brisas. If anyone's ever been to Acapulco or ever seen a movie or anything, It's pink and white. You'll see pink and white Jeeps, pink and white. It's this whole resort. And this is a chapel that was built by a gentleman. His family built Las Brisas. His sons died while building, and they built the cross. I saw the cross from the mountain. And I knew I couldn't be but so far if I could see the cross, because I could see the cross from my balcony. So that was like my salvation, having seen the cross, knowing that Guadalajara is very far from Acapulco. So that was my salvation, and I saw it at night, and that's exactly how I saw it, with that red light on top. And that's kind of what kept me going, knowing that I wasn't so far. Once several deals were made, and I'm going back and forth, because remember they said we sent proof your daughter was alive. So my dad, the ransom was paid twice. The kidnappers never got it, my dad never got it back, but we all live in Mexico, right? Okay, we get it. So they sent proof of life, and I have a picture of it, but they sent my hair and my earrings, because I said to him, did you ever think I wasn't coming back? And he said, absolutely. So there was a question that had to be asked. And before I was born, my dad bought me a doll from the airport in Vegas. And the doll's name was Jill. And she looked a lot, if anybody ever saw a TV show called either Family Affair or Buffy and Jody, or there was a doll called Mrs. Beasley. She kind of resembled Mrs. Beasley. But her name was Jill. And the question was to ask me, what's his other baby's name? Well, apparently my mother did not like that question because I have two sisters. So I could have easily said one of them. But I knew it was Jill. And my dad knew that I knew it was Jill, which is very random for it to be a doll. So they asked me the question, and I said Jill. And then, hey, we're in Mexico. Huh? Jill. He, Jill. He, Jill. He let me write it. Jill. So they got it back to my dad, and therefore he knew. So you want to know how I ended up coming back? So you had the federales involved. You had both sides of the government involved. I have, what are they called? I have the telegrams from the State Department signed by Henry Kissinger, who was the Secretary of State at the time, with communications about the kidnapped American, although in the beginning they thought we were Cuban. The Mexican government, federales, kidnapped the kidnapper's family. Everybody. Not just your brother, sister. I will just take it to a 2-month-old baby. That is what I know. A deal was made. The head guy in charge, name was Biki. He was, I don't know how to say it in English, but a bandito, a bandit, the reason you don't want to drive the Mexico-Acapulco highway even in 2024, when people say, do you want to drive cross country? No, thank you. And if you've ever seen the movie Man on Fire, my mother had to walk out of it because there are a lot of similarities. And upon my research, I found out that one of the consultants on Man on Fire was one of the cops involved, allegedly helping my family. Okay, so we're going to fast forward there. And Biki said, okay, fine. Return the family, we'll return the girl. He took the deal, as my dad would say. That proceeded to me being taken to the second place of shelter, where I was, because again, I was outside the entire time. I remember crossing a river and these 2 damn alligators. And it's Mexico before climate change, so rainy season was rainy season. Let me just say that. Hurricanes were like it was during the summer months. And we crossed over this river, and they got me to this house, and I remember this little boy throwing an apple under the door. Now, all the townspeople knew who I was. Everybody in town knew who I was. I didn't know what was happening outside, but again, it's a town way up in the mountains, and it's all in the Mexico-Acapulco carretera. They took me, I was there one night. Then I walked, they say, about 20 miles that one night to get to a highway. When I get to this highway, the Acapulco, Mexico carretera, it's a two-lane highway, and on this side is a man in a Volkswagen, because Acapulco's big in Volkswagen cars. And he's telling me to cross the highway. And Stockholm Syndrome is real, let's just say that. And I'm going, no. Grabs me and puts me in his car. He was an ex-federal who they agreed could come and get me. He takes me to his house. Well, that would be no different than somebody telling you all that, Denzel's gonna be at your house. So his whole entire family was there. I will never forget. There were so many people and they were staring at me. And I wasn't sure why I was there. I did not know I was going home. All I know is all these people staring at me. So the woman puts me in a room and she's like, sleep. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't know what's happening, but I'm good. And about 4 hours later, these door bust open. And these two guys come in and they're like, we got her. And they go to grab me. And again, no thank you. I don't know you. And they've got big guns. I later found out my sisters had nicknamed them. One they named Serpico because he was a federal, but he came from a very, very wealthy family and just did this because it was fun. And he just did this because it was fun. And the other one they called Charles Bronson because he literally looked like Charles Bronson. So Serpico, to get me to go, did 2 backflips. And I laughed and they were able to pick me up because I was holding onto the bedspread. They put me in the car, we drive and drive and drive, we end up in Acapulco, and as we drive through Acapulco, you know how like, I can only reference New York. If you're in Manhattan, there are like posters on the wall that they paint on. There are all these pictures of me. It's the same picture, but as I'm driving, I'm like, holy crap. So there are all these pictures of me, and they take me to what I used to know in Costa Azul was the papeleria. I'm like, why am I here? And back of the papeleria is the Federales office. And there's this huge cutout of me, like when you go to a movie, a premiere or something. They told me to call my dad, and I did. And he says, so at the condo where we lived, it was old school, like you just pick up your phone in your house, and the woman answers downstairs, and it's like plug in. So she connected me, and my dad got on the phone, and I said, Daddy, and he said, baby, and he screamed and fell to the ground. I don't know if he fell, but he was hysterical. He came and got me. So that's kind of a quick version of, how I was rescued. And like I said, I went back to the States about no more than 4 days later. It was very, very quick. And I ended up staying there for a long period of time. So we're going to pivot and go today. You all saw my hubby. I told you about the open heart surgery. I do have a son, he's 25. Just last year, oh no, how did I get to Playa del Carmen?
Yes.
Well, May of 2019, I went to the doctor. And guess what? I have congestive heart failure and my heart is only operating at 23%. Has nothing to do with the aneurysm. Completely separate. Oh, your dad had a weak heart too. Oh, and so did your grandmother. And one of her daughters, Mary and Martha, the twins, Martha died because she too had heart problems. Oh, well, thank you for sharing family. And I'm also going to say, like I said, once I was I mentioned it somewhere there, we weren't allowed to talk about my kidnapping. Therapy was not an option. I was not allowed to go to therapy because we don't talk about those things. They thought I'd forget. They said, she'll just forget. Yeah, no. So I moved back to the States. I'm an adult now. Life is great. I had already had the open heart surgery. Then I find out about the congestive heart failure. I come home, literally, and I said, Eric, we're leaving. And he said, where are we going? Because like he said, I will get a job. I will quit a job. I wasn't meant for 9 to 5. My best friend right here knows that. That's not my ministry. So I was like, we're moving back to Acapulco. He said, someday we will. No, I said, we're moving back to Mexico. He said, someday we will. I said, no. So someday, one day is today. This is what the doctor said. They say the average person lives 5 years, and I don't want to be here anymore. He was in the Air Force at the time. He's a flyer, so he was always gone regardless. So when you're home, fly you behind here. And that's what we ended up doing, but he could not understand how we were going to be moving so fast. He could not get it. He's like, what do you mean? That was in July. No, that was in May. I went back. I said, I'm putting everything on Facebook Market or giving it away. He's like, I don't understand. I'm putting everything on Facebook Market or giving it away. I don't want it. Like, we're leaving. He could not understand how something like that could happen so fast. I made it happen that fast. I'm not playing. I don't. And hence, moved here in 2019. We did leave for a short period of time. We won't even talk about me living in Washington State. Because he's done so much for me, I thought I would fulfill his dream of working for Boeing after retirement from 31 years at the Air Force. Yeah, no, that didn't work for neither one of us. So here we are back here in Playa where we belong. And then last year, while being in Washington, I was really, really sick, couldn't figure out what's wrong. So like my sister said, if somebody's gonna get something that nobody's ever heard of, I was diagnosed with giant cell arteritis. Y'all heard of that one? And polymyalgia rheumatica. One causes the other. And the medicine from the congestive heart failure probably caused them all, as well as me having kidney issues. So when I found out about the giant cell arteritis, they had to go in and cut here and take a piece of the temporal artery and test it and stuff. They said that I could lose my eyesight, and definitely within my left ear within about 5 years. Left eye within about 5 years. So I deal with that, and the eyesight is getting worse on a regular basis. But that's okay. So, what time is it? 5 minutes? So I'm going to wrap this up really quickly because it's kind of like a lot, and I know that. But all of that to say that it is a lot. But if nothing else, those who don't know me and never knew any of this would be like, well, I wasn't expecting that to come out of her mouth because she seems fine. And I am. But it was a conscious choice, and it is a conscious choice daily. It is a choice that that has happened has to define me. It happened, and like I said, it happened for a reason. Everything had to happen. Damn it, my dad had to walk past my grandfather's jail cell to see a picture of my mother for them to meet, for this all to happen exactly, for all of us to be sitting in this room. Anything, any little pivot could have changed it all. And I wouldn't be the person I am. None of us, we wouldn't be here at this moment spending time together. So I firmly believe, for me, I know it's my destiny. I know it's my destiny to share this. And this is a much abbreviated version, because Lord knows there's so many. There's a story about Joey Gallo putting a hit out on my dad. Google Joey Gallo if you don't know. So there are a whole bunch of stories. But this is just a taste of what I've walked through and what I continue to rise through, in spite of being told that what has happened to me should have put me down. Why aren't I down? Why aren't I on the streets? Or whatever the case may be. It's a choice. So I'd really like to thank all of you for coming. I would like to thank all of you who chose to share. And if she hands me a bouquet of sunflowers, sweet baby brown Jesus. Callie has been on this journey with me since 2019. We had so much interest. This deck has been in the hands of Alicia Rashad. It was in the hands of Ryan Coogler, who, if you don't know, we'll say Wakanda. Tisha Campbell actually signed on to produce it at one point. What's his name? Who recently passed away? The godfather of... Come to find out that Clarence Avant was best friends with my aunt. My aunt heard we were doing this. She sent it directly to Clarence. Clarence put it directly into Ted, his son-in-law's hands. We had a meeting to come here to meet with Questlove, because he had just signed with 30 Rock and Peacock. And guess what happened? Pandemic. We were in New York strictly for the meeting. Everybody heard the world is closing. I had to get on a plane to go back here. She You went to LA? She stayed in New York. Quest and their whole team had to get back to LA, and the world shut down, and then we had a writer's strike and everything else. So all of that to say, there's been so much interest. Everyone who's seen the deck, everyone who's heard about this, absolutely loves it. So hopefully it'll get picked up. We'll make that happen. But in spite of that, I just want to share with people that your circumstances do not define you. They don't have to. Your zip code you were born into, the zip code you live in, or the one you want to move to. It does not define who you are. If you make the choice to be the architect of your own life, you so can. And I'll be damned if someone tells you not to. Tell them to call me. Thank you all for coming.
On stage and behind the scenes, we want to thank you for being here. From our own talent and bravery
to the energy and attention, I know this has been an unforgettable experience. And before you leave tonight, please join me in wishing my mom a happy early birthday by giving her the flowers she deserves, now and every day. Her birthday is on the 22nd. I love you, Mom. Thank you for everything. This is amazing, and I'm so proud of you. Happy birthday. Congratulations.
So my son is coming for Christmas, and it's his first time here. Oh! Okay, he's got a great voice.
Now this is for, I guess, the three most prominent testosterone in your life. Me, Trey, and Eric. And I love you, we all love you. Proud of you.
And while the family still calls me Gail, these flowers are for me and my mother, your sister, darling. And one is from me, and one is from
Lois is my aunt. She passed away in '09 on my brother's wedding. This is the month of August.
It was an amazing experience, a great story.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I could not be any more inspired. I am in absolute awe.
It was, I would say, wonderful, and being able to hear and see another woman speak her story without fear.
No matter what cards you're dealt or experiences you have, you can still do more, be more, and shout your truth from the rooftop. And that's what I'm going to do now that Gailey led the way.
I truly appreciate every last bit of your transparency, of your authenticity, and minds are going to be blown by your resilience, truly.
This is her brave story, so I'm very happy that I got to witness it, hear it, and see it, and I cannot wait to see it on the big screens.